rest stops, traveling with kids. We've all been there. I've done lots of things at rest stops. But I've never shown my tits. I did that tubing down the Salt River. Stay tuned, because you all are about to go on the I-10 Tit Tour of 2009. Welcome to the stage, Leanne.
You won't be seeing them tonight. So this is a war story. I was 11 weeks pregnant when my husband deployed to Afghanistan, and I was 35 weeks pregnant when he came home. And he came home early, not because I was pregnant. Oh no, the military doesn't give a shit about that. He came home pregnant because he had orders for a new assignment here at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base here in Tucson. And we were living in Valdosta, Georgia, which was about 1,900 miles away. And so he had less than a month to go from a night schedule to a day schedule, from a posture of combat to the comforts of home, from taking lives to welcoming the birth of his son. And he had to do all of that and prepare his family to move across the country in less than a month. But this is not his story. This is my story. I have never served in the military. I'm a civilian. And I am under no oath to carry out orders. Not technically, anyway. So my husband and I were understandably concerned about moving with a newborn. His report no later than date and his due date were like the same week. So report no later than date to Tucson, due date of child in Valdosta, same time. So he asks his colonel, the one at DM that's going to be his boss, if we can have an extension. We're like, just 2 weeks. Just give us 2 more weeks. The extension was denied. The colonel said, and these were his words, "My wife did it, she can too." So we had some options. And the solution we came up with wasn't ideal. It was to have my labor chemically induced at 39 weeks. A medically unnecessary procedure, but one that accommodated my husband's report no later than date, my son's due date, such an inconvenience, that my body was now under orders to. And yeah, we could have gone up command, we could have gone through the ranks and appealed this decision, but commanders, they have a way of making assignments really suck. And that's the least bad thing. A commander can also derail a career when a wife raises too much hell or stirs up too much shit. So you adapt, you overcome. So I made some plans. I planned the best I could. I had a very simple birthing plan. On the evening of March 24th, 2009, I checked into the hospital, this after a day of helping the movers and the packers empty out our home. And so they gave me all the chemicals they're supposed to do to start labor, and the next morning they shoved the, oversized knitting needle up there to break my waters. And we waited, and despite all of that, the doors stayed shut. I went from being dilated to 3 to being dilated to 1. I went in reverse. My son was there. He had dropped. He was ready to go. I was closed for business. So the body doesn't take orders. And about 20 hours later, I was rushed into surgery for an emergency C-section. And the doctors had given me some IV narcotics because about halfway into the induction, I'm out of my mind. I'm out of my mind with pain. Not only pain, but I'm also really fucking angry that this is happening to begin with. I'm angry and I am grieving. So after my son is born, about an hour after he's born, and after I've been, wheeled out of recovery into my new room, I haven't seen him yet. About an hour or so later, they give him to me, and I'm like, I think he's dead. I think they've handed me this doll baby from the breastfeeding classes. I'm like, what is this? My mom can't convince me that he's breathing, and he is. And I think that happened because I could not trust myself to know whether or not my son was breathing because I had already betrayed my instincts by doing and agreeing to this procedure to begin with. And I agonized over this decision. Months before, I was I was at a dinner with a bunch of other military spouses, and their husbands were deployed. Some of them were pregnant too. And I told them how worried I was about doing this, how I was worried about my recovery. And they couldn't believe that I was worried about my recovery. My recovery. And one colonel's wife, I think she had 3 kids, she just said, "Your recovery? You're just having a baby. Our pioneer mothers did it. You can too." So after the drugs wear off, I meet my son again, and he's fine, and I know he's fine, and I'm ready to start breastfeeding, and it's not going well, which, it doesn't for a lot of women, the day of. And the nurse hands me my baby, and she looks at me, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, we have your birthing plan tacked up on the bulletin board in the nurses' lounge. And you know what? Nothing went right for you, did it?" And she just laughed. And she kept laughing even when I wasn't. And so we went home, to the home that had a card table and chairs and a mattress on the floor. And I had these staples holding my body together, and I was getting up and down off of this, mattress to feed my son and to pack up, all the other things that are left behind that you're trying to scramble to, get together during a move. And I could feel the staples tear, every time I did anything. And my milk supply was shit. Of course it was shit. And so I called the lactation consultant, and she was like, just keep going, keep trying. And then the doctor gave me Reglan, which is a prescription medication used to get, your milk going. And Reglan, fun fact, is contraindicated for people with depression, and no one asked me about that part of my medical history. That's another story for another time. So my son, he couldn't latch. There's nothing there, who could blame him. So, and by that time, it was time to get on the road. We had to get, from, Valdosta, Georgia to Texas to kind of stop by and see family, and then on to Tucson, Arizona. And so we did. We got in the vehicle. My dad was driving. My husband was following behind with a trailer and with the dog in the truck. And then my mom was, helping out and providing moral support. And so every couple of hours, we would pull over to a rest stop. I would, try to get my son to latch. He wouldn't. I'd hand him over to my mom. She'd feed him the formula, pitiful breast milk mix that, I could, manage to mix together. And then we would strap Gus back into the car seat. I'd strap my boobs back into this industrial grade, hospital grade breast pump. And we'd just get on down the road. And I had a basin right beside me that I could use to, clean the equipment. And I swear, everyone on I-10 saw my boobs. Everyone. And I think by the time we got to Louisiana, my husband would pass us, and I would just flash them because they were already out there. And I was like, well, hell, why not? So we did. We called it the I-10 Tit Tour of 2009 because it was just all out there. And they never felt full. I never had the embarrassing leakage or anything like that, you know. They never felt full. And I once told a friend who had no idea what I was talking about, what it felt like, and I was like, you know that keg of beer at the end of the night that's about to be floated? You can pump and pump and pump, and you ain't getting shit but foam. That was me. There wasn't much coming out. So eventually we made it to Tucson. You know, we made it, we got there, and for the first 8 weeks of my kid's life, I am pumping every 2 hours for 20 minutes. I am collecting milk out of the bottom of that bottle with a syringe, and I am getting maybe an ounce a day. I do this every day for 8 weeks. And finally, the pediatrician said, you know what, that 1 ounce, that was great, but it's time to stop. You need to bond with your son, not your breast pump. And she was right. But still, I would go to Target, and I would get ugly looks every time we went on formula runs. And I heard one woman within earshot say, I can't believe people still feed their babies that trash. And this is 2009, and I really hope the nursing landscape has gotten kinder than it was then. And even now I have a lot of anxiety telling this story because I'm wondering if you're thinking, but did she try this? Did she try that? Did she try hard enough? Because I did it. She can too. So I was an anxious mom. I was very anxious. And I didn't really bond with my son until I got pregnant with my daughter 2 years later. And in those intervening years, there was postpartum depression, and my husband was gone all the time for work. And there are more stories. There are lots of stories. But this story pisses me off more than any of the others. I can feel it in my shoulders. I can feel it in my elbows. It's like hitting my elbow on something, you know, that kind of pain. It's shooting out through my fingertips. I'm angry because I know that this bullshit is still happening. I know this bullshit, this lie of she can do it, or I can do it, she can too, or we've done it, they can too, is still going on, especially in military families. And I just think of all the orders that we place on the bodies of those who mother. So my son, he's about 11, and he is kind, he is smart, and he is funny. He's funny as hell. And he has the darkest sense of humor. And he gets it honest. And he gets it because I think, like me, he's an anxious kid. He prepares for catastrophe. He's always ready. He has a plan for disaster. And he's almost 11, and in a couple of years, he could enlist. He could be drafted. But part of me wonders, too, if his body has always been under orders, if his body was put under orders in some way to have the temperament that he has because it has been organized by war. And then it also makes me wonder about the countless families and children whose lives are upended, destroyed, traumatized by disasters, natural, unnatural, by wars carried out under orders of a military that my husband serves. What does that mean? My husband has not deployed since the births of our children, just because of the nature of his job. But that doesn't mean he can't. And I remember a couple of years ago when my son was 6, our daughter was 3, I asked him, what does a 6-year-old need to know about war? What can I say? What does a 6-year-old need to know? And he said, not a thing, unless that 6-year-old's home is being bombed. And even then, And so every morning for the last week, I've been waking up wondering about the even then. Every day we find ourselves possibly closer to another war, a new war, a war that my husband's service and my family's sacrifices will be used as a prop to support. And I wonder what to tell my kids. And I really don't know. But I do know what I will not tell my children. I will not say to them, they did it, you can too.
Thank you for that, Leanne. Thank you so much. That's beautiful.